Nebraska's coaching staff is finally officially complete. Who's the best hire of the bunch? We'll talk about it after this.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Wednesday edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. It's a snow day in eastern Nebraska. Connor, I don't know if that means much to you with an infant daughter, but it means a lot when I've got a couple teenagers at home. Snow days are, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's they enjoy it. I'm not sure how much I enjoy it, but we're finally getting some snow in the Omaha area for the first time of this season.
Yeah, it hasn't affected my life really at all yet. I haven't gone outside yet. It doesn't look to be like too bad. There's some snow coming down at the moment.
It's not like a life-stopping kind of snow. No.
Yeah.
Didn't stop Nebraska on Tuesday from announcing the final hire of Matt Rhule's coaching staff. So this is anticlimactic. His salary had already been reduced. He had announced the hire himself. Mike Ekeler had on social media. That came on Monday late in the day. But Nebraska got around to putting this out yesterday that its special teams coordinator is in the fold. Mike Ekeler is here from Tennessee. So I think we counted this up the other day, and I came up with 12 full-time coaches, or what we call full-time coaches. It's actually 13. So I was forgetting Glenn Thomas. I don't know. He slipped through the cracks. I think with Glenn in that role of quarterbacks coach, and you have Dana Holgorsen on staff, you almost forget, hey, the former Pittsburgh Steelers offensive assistant is there and ready to work with the quarterback. So it's actually 13 in the spots that used to be occupied by 10 coaches. And then Nebraska has others who recruit and do things. But what we want to do today is kind of go through this group. So first of all, a final rundown. New to Nebraska's coaching staff this year are Mike Ekeler at special teams, Addison Williams in the secondary, Terry Bradden, who is now on staff at Nebraska officially after the Super Bowl with the D-line. Phil Simpson is coaching the defensive ends. Phil Snow is also working with those players up front on defense, but he's the associate head coach. Da'Keel Shorts is Nebraska's wide receivers coach. They're all new. Almost new is Dana Holgorsen. He's been around for 4 games, but is now locked in for a couple years. Back, but in a new place, John Butler, the DC, Marcus Satterfield, the former OC who coaches tight ends. Back in the same place, linebackers coach Rob Dvorak, running backs coach EJ Barthel, offensive line coach Donovan Raiola, and quarterbacks coach Glenn Thomas. So we got all that?
I think so. I'm glad you broke it down that way. So that leaves what, 1, 2, 3. That leaves only 3 original in their same place assistants from Matt Rhule's staff when he got here, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Dvorak, Barthel, and Donovan Raiola, Glenn Thomas. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I definitely haven't thought about Glenn Thomas in a while. When I think about the offense now, and specifically quarterbacks, I think about Dana Holgorsen, and he's going to come up in the conversation that we have here. But yes, good breakdown, and I think we're all straightened out now. We can move forward.
So Troy Dannon has been vocal in his praise for Rhule, and Rhule's urgency, I think, is what stuck out to Dannon to do what he did in November, making an OC change, and then to be as aggressive as Rhule was in December, especially after losing his defensive coordinator just days into bowl season. What Dannon said in his recent interview with KETV that we talked about in the podcast on Tuesday is that this staff gives Nebraska a better chance to compete against the best teams in the Big Ten. So overall, I would agree it's an upgrade. Like, Nebraska has a deeper roster of coaches to begin with, and what I think is a more Big Ten like football coaching staff here to go into year 3 for Matt Rhule.
It's definitely more. Oh boy, what's I mean, one simple way to say it, is it's better. It's more experienced than it has been before. There seems to be this, like, you have Dana Holgorsen, and Dana Holgorsen brought in, basically his wide receiver coach. I mean,
Yep.
the one guy that I guess I have some, it's not necessarily concern,
I know where you're going.
questions about, is it Terry Bradden or is it Phil Simpson?
Oh, that's a, it's not
I
what I
mean,
thought.
yeah. Where did you think
About
I was?
are you targeting the new coaches here with this only? Are you looking at the whole staff with the one place that you're not sure about, or are you going with just the new hires? Because I thought you were going with DJ Barthel. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? What? Yeah,
I see what you're saying. I generally have I have questions about that, but I'm talking about like guys that are unproven or unknown commodities because of their lack of experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Terry Bradden was not the primary D-line coach for the Chiefs. Like, he wasn't the guy. I mean, he was coaching the D-line, but their Chiefs are not losing their front line D-line coach. So there's for sure, and this is his first stop, certainly his first stop in college at a major level, at a high level of college football, Terry Bradden. So yeah, you wonder, how's that going to work? It could work great. I mean, the guy has coached Chris Jones, and I think he has the respect of Nebraska's defensive lineman right off the bat because of the work that he's done in the NFL. You look at that Chiefs defensive line last game not included, and it's been very good. Who's the other one that you mentioned as maybe a bit of a question? Phil Simpson. Yeah, I mean, Phil Simpson fills an important role on the staff, I think, and part of the reason that Nebraska brought him on is to have that connection to Florida and have that connection to South Florida, where a year ago, when Phil was with Matt Rhule for the first season of the Rhule era, not in this role, but more in he was in a quality control, or he was in more of a second level type coaching position. He helped bring Nebraska to Corey Barney and Willis McGahee and Vincent Shavers and Larry Tarver and Amari Sanders, those 5 that the Huskers signed out of Miami in the 2023 recruiting class. So you know that he's going to give you that connection. And he spent last year at Florida State, and he's back to work with the DNs. We're going to talk about that a little bit, like what happens with the way that Nebraska coaches the D line in the second segment of the show. But first, what I want to get to is what do you? So okay, I think we could all agree that Dana Holgorsen is the most impactful. That's the most impactful hire that Matt Rhule made in this period of transition. Come in, take over the offense. You're going to turn this into an offense that can help Nebraska win games. We saw that. We saw him do that in the Wisconsin game, the one time that he had the opportunity to coach at Memorial Stadium in his 4 games. That's number one. We're also going to take John Butler out of the equation, because when you're a DC, it's going to be impactful, and the jury is kind of still out on Butler. We know Nebraska had a good defensive coordinator in Tony White. It's expected that the Huskers will play good defense in 25, but for the purpose of this exercise, what in order of importance are the 3 moves that Rhule made as you see them most likely to affect the Huskers in a positive way or a negative way in 2025?
I think, well, this might surprise you, Mitch. Like, I think Mike Ekeler is approaching Dana Holgorsen levels of importance. Yeah, like I think that's huge. And once again, there's no guarantee that it's going to work, but Nebraska got a proven special teams coordinator, and I think they got a good fit for their staff, and I think they got a good fit for Nebraska. Like, I don't know, Ekeler sort of checks all the boxes. And so I Nebraska's lost some games due to special teams over the last couple of years. That could impact winning pretty directly and pretty quickly, and you could flip it quick. You could go from one of the worst special teams teams in the country to a good one, kind of overnight. And I think Mike Ekeler is the kind of guy that could bring that to the table. So I'm super, super high on that one. And then there's probably a couple other guys that come to your head right away. And one of the guys that we didn't mention in that giant list was Phil Snow, who was brought in really at the same time that Daniel Holgerson was, although in a less sort of like,
didn't make as much of a splash.
Right. It wasn't as like official or like written out on paper yet of here's exactly what we're going to do. But as they put the other pieces to the staff together, Rhule uses Phil Snow as a right-hand man, especially on the defensive side. And when you have a coordinator who's taking the reins and he's sort of new to the program and he's sort of new to what you do and John Butler, then Phil Snow, being like the top kind of lieutenant-ish on defense is a really big deal, I think.
He's the ultimate safety valve for Nebraska right now, Snow. I think because Butler can lean on him as a relatively new defensive coordinator. He's done this a bit in his past, but new to it at Nebraska. Snow has been there and done that, been a defensive coordinator at various levels of the game, and he's worked with Matt Rhule in this role. So he knows what Rhule's going to be looking for from his defensive coordinator. I think Phil Snow is a valuable piece for John Butler. I think Phil Snow can help you answer a question on your defensive line. And again, we're gonna get more into that after the break. And then I think Phil Snow is just important for Matt Rhule. We heard from Rhule a couple of weeks ago about how Snow ran the search for the special teams coordinator. So Snow gets a lot of the credit for Nebraska bringing in Mike Ekeler, Nebraska being able to make that connection. Snow was in charge of setting up and administering the interview process as Nebraska went through candidates for this job, and you landed on somebody that I think everyone agrees was the best hire that Nebraska possibly could have made for this position. So right off the bat, long before they're even into a game situation where Snow can help, he's already making his impact felt within the program. The other guy that I would go with in my top three, I have Ekeler and Snow on there as well, is Da'Keil Shorts. And I think this one also has gone maybe not discussed as much as some of the other hires, but because of his connection to Holgerson, and they go back to West Virginia and Houston together, I just think there's going to be that synergy between the OC and the wide receivers coach. And I think it's really important in this offense. I think it's really important for Dylan Raiola, and you've seen him already. Shorts in his short time at Nebraska.
Nice.
Didn't mean to do that, but make over that receiving core. Like it's different with Key, Hunter, and all of the additions that Nebraska's made through the transfer portal.
The most obvious problem with Nebraska football over the last 2 years as a team has been the offense, and so they have to put themselves in a position for that to make some sense and be good. And hiring Dana Holgerson and letting him have the keys and then having him sort of bring his people in, I think is a really great start to that. It is fundamental to Matt Rhule's success at Nebraska. So yes, certainly impactful. All right, we'll come back. We'll talk about the just some questions, some lingering questions that we have about whether it's individual people on the staff or where the duties might be divvied up. Back after this.
A moment here to tell you about Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little bit of TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space around here, wherever it might be, other parts of my home, it helps get me back into a routine when you get into a new year. So whether you're tidying up, you're clearing out, you just want to give your home a new look to start 2025. Wayfair has got everything you need. It's all within your budget. The site is easy to navigate. You find what you're looking for in a short period of time. And there's something for every home, no matter your space, no matter your budget. Go ahead, give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you today on a Wednesday. Another reminder: get your questions out there for the mailbag coming up this Friday. This week could always use your guys' thoughts and directions to head on Friday.
Email us lockedonneb@gmail.com. Had a good turnout last week on the mailbag, so hoping to do that again. Connor, something we touched on the Tuesday episode. You were going to have an encounter with the Red Panda last night in downtown Omaha. How did that go?
So I was happy that before the game I got to go back and sort of, run through a game plan with her. And I'm glad I did.
Just the fact that you spoke to her, I think, puts you in this elite class of the population that very few people have ever experienced.
I think so too. And she's so nice. And so I went back there, and I'm glad I did, because there's a specific way you have to throw. Like I went in there and I was like, hey, what do? I just throw the bowls, whatever, start flipping them like Frisbees. And she was like, no. You have to turn it on its side and flip it like, this way. If you're watching along with us on YouTube, you could see my hands doing a variety of different things. So I'm glad I got that. And she told me the sort of cadence of it. And I think she's got a great catch radius. So it was hard to mess up.
Oh yeah.
But
Phil Shorts would love it.
Yeah, exactly. She's like Calvin Johnson. She's Megatron of catching bulls. So I think I got him to her in an appropriate manner, but she did on the flip ups. She did drop a couple, but she finished. It. She got the 5. She got the 5 at the end. So I was happy with that.
Good. Did they break? The bulls break when they hit the hardwood?
No, they're really. I don't even know how to describe. They don't really break. I actually, one might have chipped, because when she catches them, she slams them together.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear it. So it's one might have chipped, but no breakage.
I know some people were wondering too after the show yesterday, when I was frazzled because I was having car problems. My daughter's car couldn't get the key fob to connect in the garage for whatever reason. After the show, I switched out the battery in both of the key fobs that connect to this car, and it worked. Didn't have to take it in. Didn't have to spend any of my money. I don't know what happened. There was like an hour-long stretch in my day yesterday, right around the time that we recorded, when absolutely nothing worked in my house or in my life. Like I couldn't get the audio to connect, the video, whatever, with our show before we got started.
You worked it all out. Best possible result, I say, from yesterday.
Yeah, everything worked out. So that was good. That was very good. That was very good.
Okay, so we have questions about. I'm glad everybody's day worked out okay yesterday. So let's talk about the defensive line and how the responsibilities might be divvied up. This has been an easier question to answer before. Now the sort of hierarchy or the setup is you have Phil Snow, who is just kind of a walking, roaming guy, but also is going to coach, I believe, the exterior or the outside defensive lineman. Is this correct?
Yeah, I don't know how it's that much different from Simpson. I guess maybe Simpson's going outside linebackers and Snow is the DNs, but we need to know, first of all, what kind of a defense Nebraska is going to play to see how those guys even break down.
Yep. And then there's Terry Bradden, who's just getting here after the Chiefs season this year, and he will be the interior defensive line coach, or just he's the one with defensive line coach tagged to him.
A little more clear for his responsibility.
So I'm curious to see how that all breaks down, and Phil Snow's responsibility and John Butler's responsibility and Phil Simpson and where that all goes. Not just on the defensive line, but on the defense in general. It's a revamped defensive staff overall.
Yeah, I mean, you could get to a situation, and I'm not saying this will happen with Nebraska, because I think they have a pretty good understanding of how the roles fit. Like Phil Snow is the senior statesman of the coaching staff as far as the assistants go. Like he's not, I don't think, going to do a whole lot of getting down and dirty with the players in like their instruction and practice. There'll be a moment here and there, but I think he's there as much to coach the coaches as he is to coach the players. So if you had three people who were similar, like in the places in their careers or in like what the expectations are from the head coach and how they work on a minute by minute basis, day by day basis with the players, then I think you could get it into a spot where it's like, all right, you got too many cooks in the kitchen and there's just not enough definition about how everyone's job is going to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And that could still be a concern, but I think because you have Snow, who's kind of up here in my hand is above my head, and then you have Bradden, who's just coming into the college coaching game, but he's been in the NFL, and Simpson, they all bring like different levels of experience and different skill set. You know, one has worked mostly with high school players in Simpson in his career. Another has worked mostly with NFL players. And then Snow has been like, he's done it all. So that's a good dynamic. It's just a matter of getting it all sorted out. And that's going to be an important element, I would say, this spring for the defense as a whole, but in particular, plus, what are you doing on defense? Are you playing with 3 down linemen? Are you playing with 4? I mean, is this the 3-3-5, but it's a new version of it? Are they going to a 4-3 because they're stacked at the defensive end spot? I don't know. And that's going to factor too in like how these guys all come together in their work.
Well, you mentioned it. Like Nebraska is clearly taking advantage of the fact that you could just have as many assistants as you damn well please these days. That's good, but you do have to be careful on how you divvy up responsibilities, and you don't want to have any overlap unless there's some real trust among these guys and the staff, and a lot of them are new. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out in the first couple of weeks of this thing, and obviously spring ball is huge too. And then I want to flip over to a couple guys on the offense. So Glenn Thomas is a guy we mentioned earlier. Let's talk about him for a second. Dana Holgorsen is here. He has opinions on how to use quarterbacks and what to do with quarterbacks and how to train quarterbacks. What does Glenn Thomas do these days?
What is it that you say that you do here?
Bob.
I think Glenn Thomas, he handles like the coaching, like we talked about
mechanics.
Yeah, we talked about with Snow that he's not going to probably get involved as much in the weeds, like in the fundamentals with the defensive linemen, that he's going to leave that more to Bradden and Simpson. I think Holgorsen operates in that way. Like he talks big picture with Dylan Raiola. I think there's a ton of interaction. Like those two have to be on the same page. But as far as like the execution of fundamentals and the in the weeds stuff, that's where Glenn Thomas comes in. And that's great if it works. If you have a coach who specifically can do that with the most important position on the field, and you have an OC who's very much in tune with the quarterbacks.
Got to be a consistent message too. You can't be getting two different things from two different people. So yeah, that'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. I also wonder, like, this is way down the line now. We don't probably have to be concerned about this at this moment. Like, is there a limit these days, Mitch, on how many headsets you get on game day?
Yeah.
If Nebraska's going to have 100 assistant coaches, I don't think they can have 100 headsets on the side.
Yeah. I'll look into that. We'll bring it up on the mailbag show. Somebody sent us a question about the headsets on game day, and we'll look into it and get to you Friday. Barthel is another guy where, okay, you've been here for 2 years, and the running backs have been kind of a mishmash both of those years. Like, had some good moments. Like, seems that Emmett Johnson is now more the guy at that spot that Nebraska's had going into a season the past 2 years. I mean, he's Dylan Raiola's running mate. They were at Scott Catholic in Omaha last night, by the way, on the Dylan Emmett 2025 tour, watching the Skyhawks play Norris. So that was cool. Taking pictures with the kids. Does this fall into the category of things that I don't care about, or where are you at with this?
What are those guys doing?
I don't know.
Yeah. Do they get like a red carpet when they go to these things.
Yeah, they have to alert. They have to alert the administration of these schools that they're coming in because they draw a crowd of students.
That's good. I'm glad they're out there seeing the people. It's a great look for everybody.
Yeah. But I mean, for EJ, it's a big year. I think. I think there was probably some question coming out of the season about were they going to run it back with EJ Barthel for another year? I mean, did Matt Rhule made some changes on this coaching staff? Ed Foley's gone. Garrett McGuire left, but Holgorsen was bringing in shorts either way, so. It was unclear exactly what spot McGuire would have had, and I think there were probably some questions about Barthel just because the running back has been, like I said, kind of disjointed as a position group. So this is probably a big year for his his progression in this Nebraska system.
No doubt. Okay, a couple more lingering things that we have to talk about after this. This time, how to recruit and develop offensive linemen. After this.
Welcome back. Snowy Wednesday in Nebraska. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me today in the aforementioned Athletic online publication. You can see that I wrote about the offensive line, and always a topic that gets people interested. So this comment from Matt Rhule a couple weeks ago when he called the media into his workroom caught my attention. He said, quote, "To win in college football, you're going to have to grow your own offensive lineman." Seems like fairly innocent. Like, is there anything at all that's controversial about that statement, Connor?
I've always thought that. I've always felt that, especially at a program like Nebraska. I don't know how other programs view it, but that's always been my general way to go as far as how to build an offensive lineman at a Midwestern Big Ten program. There's a lot of offensive, Nebraska is just a place where you're going to have more access to offensive linemen, comparatively than to really good offensive linemen comparatively than to other really good players at different positions around the country. You're just closer to them, right? You're closer to the meat and potatoes. So yeah, I think Nebraska, you absolutely can and frankly should build it that way.
So yeah, he said to repeat, to win in college football, you're going to have to grow your own offensive lineman. I have a friend, a longtime follower of Nebraska football, who did not love this statement. He felt it was kind of short-sighted. That Rhule was in some way saying that he was dismissing the importance of the transfer portal in this era of the sport where the portal, hey, it factors in everything. I didn't really see it that way. I don't think he's saying you don't need the portal or you shouldn't use the portal. I think he's just saying that if you're going to have a line of 5 players and depth, that you can't, receiver, maybe receiver's the one that comes to mind. Maybe specialists. If you have to go to the portal to build the whole thing, all right, it can be done. It can't, to me, what Rhule's saying is you can't do that with the line.
I think he's right. Now, can't is maybe strong, I guess. I don't know that you can't, but I don't think you should.
Right. It's not good for your line. So Nebraska just fortified its line in a hugely important way by adding Rocco Spindler and Elijah Pritchett out of the portal. Those guys are tough to find. They are pricey. And I don't think this is the first time that Nebraska's done anything like this in the portal on the offensive line. They've tried, and they got Ben Scott, who was a hit, but otherwise it's been tough to find offensive linemen in the portal who you can make work. And to think that you can do it with multiple players or even one important player every year is maybe slightly unrealistic. I think you have to do it from the inside primarily, and then you kind of, if there's a piece that you got to plug here, if there's a piece that you got to plug here, you do that. One stat: Ohio State and Notre Dame just played in the national championship game. 10 starters in the championship game on the offensive line for those two teams combined. All 10 were signed out of high school by those two programs.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's a really good stat. Mitch, like, think about it too. Think about what Nebraska just went through with attempting to get 2 or 3 offensive linemen in the transfer portal. It was really hard for them, and it was expensive as hell. Like, the price tag on those guys, I mean, the tackle is the spot where you're going to have to pay money to get guys, especially if they're established. And if you're at Nebraska and you want to win, like, you want to get players that are established, not like, dudes who were sitting in third string on Georgia's roster or something like that, right? You want guys who could play and have played before. And those guys are going to cost a lot of money. And Nebraska's 2 starting offensive linemen that they got out of the transfer portal this year costed a lot of money. So you can't do that every year. It's just, it wouldn't be healthy for either your offensive line or, your NIL coffers or anything in between.
To be clear, it's great that they were able to do it. It's great that Nebraska's collective 1890 came together and was able to raise the money that was needed to sign those 2 players. It got hairy. It was down to the end. I mean, it was early January when Pritchett came on board, and then later in the month with Spindler. But as far as the 16 who signed for Nebraska out of the portal, they were the last 2. So that was 15 and 16 to commit. There was one player in between the 2 of them who committed and then didn't make it to school here. But of the guys who were here, these were the last 2. So it was, there was a difficult proposition for sure in terms of getting the resources together and then actually making it hit. The later you get in the process, the more desperate other teams are out there. Spindler did an interview with some of our podcast friends over at the Average Joe Sports Show.
Nice.
And he talked about how he had, maybe he was exaggerating here, it didn't sound like it in the interview. He talked about how he had 900 texts that went unresponded to. And this is just like in the day, because he put his phone number out in the when you go in the portal, you can say, don't contact, whatever. You can leave your email address, your phone number for coaches to reach out. And he put his phone number in there, and he's like, maybe it was a little bit of a I shouldn't have done that, because he had a huge number of people who he never even got back to. And the fact that Nebraska got his attention and was able to get a visit and was able to win him over on that visit, and then hold off some other suitors after he left Nebraska and went and visited additional schools, like, it speaks to a heck of a job that they did in getting him. So
And Mitch, like, to be clear, Nebraska is building and developing offensive linemen through traditional recruiting methods right now. They just happen to find themselves in a position this year where they lost a couple starters off of last year's team, and they had to fill a hole, and they had to fill it now. And they're unsure about the health status of a couple of the other guys who were slotted for playing time this year, like Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran. So, like, you have, I mean, I'm counting, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 sophomore or younger offensive linemen right now that you've recruited and are in the process of developing that will play for you going forward. It just is a weird gap year for them, I think.
This spring is huge for those young offensive linemen, because you have 5 of the more, in the case of Gunnar Gatula, not an older guy, but you have 5 of the more either older or established offensive linemen who are coming off of surgeries, and they're not going to be a full go or at all a go for the spring. So if you're Grant Bricks, if you're Jason Machachak, Sam Sledge, this spring is the moment. Like, with the offensive line, the future is in March and April. Like, you're fast forwarding and to see if these guys can earn spots in the 2 deep.
Guys who are close. I don't know if you mentioned Sledge, Brock Knutson, Gunnar Gatula, to get more playing time from last year and to really lock down a spot. Like, it's a big moment for those guys who are right on the cusp of playing time, but also a big developing moment for, you mentioned Bricks or, Preston Talmua,
All right, he's a Gibson Pyle, from that class last year. Nebraska signed 15 offensive linemen in its last 3 recruiting classes. The 3 that Matt Rhule has brought in, 15 from high school, and then 5 from the portal. In the 3 years before Rhule took over, so the 20, 21, 22 classes, 7 offensive linemen signed out of high school. So they've more than doubled the amount of linemen that they're signing from the high school ranks under this Rhule regime.
Clearly, that's Nebraska's strategy, and sounds like both of us are very okay with that, and honestly prefer it that way at this point. Okay, good conversation today. Once again, don't forget to get your questions in for the mailbag. That'll come up on Friday, so you still have a day or so to do that. But appreciate you all listening today and making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, you could check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig puts the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.